Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of that thing we call Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter like we are each and every single week at Wednesday, 5:30-ish on the East Coast. And we are ready to rock. John Saponaro out in Los Angeles, California. And my co-host holding it down back in New Jersey, Matt Ibby Ibanez. Ibby, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, John. It's hot. It is hot over here in Jersey. I'm just trying my best.
It's very hot here too.
It is just warm, man. I wish I could say the same about our Mets. Granted, last night was a lot of fun. They did win, and we'll talk more about that and Francisco Alvarez and all that stuff. But I'm very curious about our conversation today, and really for the next 2 weeks, just trying to figure out exactly what can and will be done with this team. I have some thoughts. I'm sure you do as well, and we'll get into all that. But overall, I'm doing well. No complaints on my end. Health is good. Hopefully, yours is as well. So let's do that thing that we do. Let's talk about this fucking team in New York.
Yeah, man. I mean, health is doing good, thankfully. Wallet is a little bit thinner than I'd like it to be. I just had to go to the mechanic, and I knew I probably needed new tires, but it turns out I need 4 new tires and new front brakes on top of the oil change. So I'm out about $1,300 today. So, if Steve Cohen wants to slide me some money, that would be fucking great. Or at the very least, just like, I don't know, get Shohei Ohtani in the offseason so I can forget about it or something. But yeah, man, no, it's hot here too. No humidity, which is always better. But I'm in the middle of doing laundry and all that stuff, and I put clothes outside of my apartment on a drying rack that needed to dry. I swear to God, like 20 minutes ago, and I just walked by them before we started the show. They're dry. Like, so the difference it would take probably like 2 days for them to dry inside my apartment, put them outside. They're already dry. Like, when we're done, I'm going to have to go get them and bring them in. So that just gives you a sense of what is going on in the world of me. Shout out to everybody in the comments. We got a lot of folks, a lot of the regulars. Patty in NYC, Carlos Ramos is back. Chris Ferraro, Stevie Mac. What is going on, everybody? Of course, the comments flying in, people reacting to my breaks. Yeah, that sucks.
Shout out to Chris. He was at the game last night. He was posting in the Facebook group. He was at the game. He had a good time. Yeah, it was awesome, man. Good stuff.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch the game in its entirety, thankfully. I watched a lot of the beginning. It got off to a good start, and then we thought, oh no. I was kind of following around like on the app, and I was like, oh shit. Oh God, here we go. I got nervous. I got real nervous. I mean,
I think we all did.
You let the Chicago White Sox put up 10 runs. It's like, you're like, okay, second and third, 2 outs, 9th inning. They're going to get one more base hit. They're going to take the lead. And I don't have that defeatist attitude. It's just the way they kept coming back. It just felt inevitable. Sometimes it doesn't matter if a team is good or bad. Team gets on a roll and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, a team gets on a roll and you're like, oh, they're not losing this game today. There's no way that's happening. Of course, you guys all know this. Everybody who's watching live, hit the thumbs up button if you like what you hear. And also, watching us on YouTube in real time is the best way to have your comments be heard, read, and reacted to in real time. We shouted out some people in the chat, but haven't brought up any comments yet. Carlos saying, hey, John, what's your address again? I heard there was a clothes drive going on outside. Listen, if you want to come all the way to Los Angeles to get a couple shirts, by all means. I feel like you're losing out.
We'll just pay Shay to take care of it. He'll find you.
Yeah, Shay will find it. Anyway, yeah, Ibby, you know what? Look, I think kind of like we did last week, there's more of this global view on the New York Mets right now because every win matters and every loss matters, obviously, a tremendous amount because of the hole that they've dug. But how they get to the wins doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was an ugly one last night, but they needed to win and they did. And I don't care about anything else, and nobody else should care about anything else to this point because they need more wins by a wide margin than they need losses. And I know it doesn't look good and it doesn't bode well, and you're like, oh, well, that means this team can't go on a run. I understand that part of it, but you got to just get wins, and you ain't throwing any of them back. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say I'm happy you brought that up because I'm kind of like, I know a lot of times this happens in football too, and it shouldn't be happening with this team at the moment because of the money that was spent and everything. But like this whole idea of losing games and just bettering your draft position and things like that's always a conversation in fan bases. But when I see things that's on the timeline, and like I said, I've been trying to do better in terms of not scrolling as much. But when I see people like attacking others, basically saying that win was basically a loss. It's like, well, no, it was a win. Like no, this team's shit. It was basically a loss. It's like, well, no, man, it goes in the books as a win because you won the game. Like I don't like that, and I would usually, specifically on the football side, like if my team stinks, like I will root, and I will openly admit this. Like I'd rather the better draft position because of. Granted, football is different because if you don't have a quarterback, you want to get a quarterback, and there's one there. Like lose out to better yourself. Don't be mediocre. That's always kind of been my approach. But with this point here, when it comes to the Mets, it's like I think you need to understand that you have to see what works and what doesn't. You want the numbers to still be there for guys that you potentially may trade so you can better your return. So you want those guys to perform. So if that leads to wins, like look, there was a bunch of scouts at the game last night, as an example. Bunch of scouts at the game last night to all watch Lucas Giolito pitch, and he got ripped. And Tommy Pham looked good, and some of our guys look pretty good. It's like, oh, maybe their stock goes up a little bit. So it's like I don't like when I see on the timeline, it's like, that was basically a loss. It's like, no, man, they won the game. Let's go on to the next. Let's see what happens. And even with these wins, and this is a little bit of a precursor of what I'll be talking about later on, even with a win like that, that doesn't change for me at least, it doesn't change my mindset in terms of what this team should be doing. Joe DeMaio just put something out before talking about how this team basically needs to win 44 games in order to get to, I think it was 89 wins, which is what is tracking as the like the number that
benchmark to make a playoff spot. Yeah.
To make the third wild card. It's like, look, man, it's hard to go into a deadline that's 2 weeks out or whatever and think that you can do that when you haven't gone on a run like that you haven't shown any of that. Now I know it's hard because, well, things like that can happen. Look at 2015, look at the Phillies, look at like all these different things that you can say. And I get that, but at the same time, I'm still sitting here on the 19th of July telling you, even after a win like that, still saying that the focus for this team should be with a mindset of selling. That's the way I feel.
Yeah, I mean, look, I largely agree with you. I'm happy that you brought up what you brought up, the way you brought it up, and everybody else in the comments right now, please go ahead and be active. Carlos, kind of the first to the point, saying sell, forget a first round exit, but not just with that. Also, just with the tenor of what we were talking about at first, which was, the win feels like a loss. I got to disagree with that so much because the win is the only thing that matters. Now, I, like you, Ibby, I'm on the line of thinking that says, look, I don't think one win, especially a quote unquote not good win, makes you go, oh, now we need to change our entire philosophy heading into the deadline. But the winning is the only thing that matters. If the Mets lose, that's the only thing that matters. And what I saw on Twitter, and I wish I could remember exactly who it was, but somebody on Twitter in this conversation this morning said, the Mets don't get any credit for all the close games they lost this year. So why are you giving them shit for the close game they won? And yeah, it was ugly. And then I think it was Rupert who kind of replied to that saying, yeah, we won 2 games in a row. One, we got great pitching and mediocre offense. The other one, we got terrible pitching and a ton of offense. That's how baseball goes sometimes. We got back-to-back wins 2 completely different ways. And so, when I look at that landscape, that for me is the thing. We're not in a position to throw back wins. We are not in a position to lament wins in any way, shape, or form. Now, again, I don't think that should change your philosophy. To bring Carlos's point back up, yeah, has this team shown us anything that even if they get to this magic number that you just laid out where the Mets can win, at a 600 clip plus to get to a playoff spot, do we think they could do that? One, do we think we can make noise in the playoffs too? No, they haven't shown an ability to do that, so why would you believe that? But having said all of that, I just don't think that you can dump on a win. They won the game.
They won the game.
It was anxiety-inducing.
Yes.
It shouldn't have been, probably.
That's Mets baseball.
But they won. That's Mets baseball in 2023. Yeah. So, look, you can't talk about that. And we're going to talk a lot about the trade deadline and some of the other questions that come up. But you can't talk about the last few games without talking about three people in particular. Some good, some bad, some great, right? Max Scherzer, Pete Alonso, Francisco Alvarez. Where do you want to start? I know you know what I'm thinking about each one of them. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the good, the bad, or the ugly?
Let's start with the good. I want to talk about Francisco Alvarez. Let's talk about the good.
Okay, Francisco Alvarez yesterday, 2 for 4, 2 home runs, 4 RBI. He now leads all major league rookies in home runs. He's got 19 on the season. He is only behind Johnny Bench all time for most home runs by a rookie catcher with 26. So he is very much within shouting distance. The kid is the truth, man. He is excellent. And it brings up this question, Ibby, and I'll throw this question at you first from Jeff Cohen, and then you can go off in any direction you want. But he says, could Alvarez lead the team in home runs?
I think he could. I think it's possible. He's at 19 now. And what does Pete have?
Pete's 25. I'll take a look right now.
Like, you're looking that up. I think it's definitely possible. Depending on how. Look, I'll put it this way. I don't want to say I hope he doesn't because I want the guy to keep hitting, but it's like I also
Pete has
want
26.
I want Pete to keep going and find his stroke again so he can get to 35, 40 home runs. Like, I would like to see that. Is it possible? Of course it's possible, depending on what happens with Pete. And, is the risk the issue? We'll talk about that in a minute. But I just think it's very special what Alvarez is doing, the turnaround that he's had from the start, what we said from the jump on here, how everyone was freaking out and talking about he's overwhelmed, he's this, he's that, he doesn't look the part, he's not ready, all these different things. And we would say time and time again, every level that this kid was at, he needed like 2-3 weeks, maybe a month as he got a little bit higher and higher to figure things out. And then he took over. And this kid is starting to take over. And the crazy thing is he's 21 years old. He looks the part. He finally, and we've talked about confidence a lot in the box. There's confidence in the box. The power is legit. It's light tower power. Just everything about him. And the fact that he's batting higher in the lineup. I think he's batting 6th today. I think if I remember correctly from what I saw for today's lineup, he's getting more and more involved in that sense, which is a good thing, which shows trust. It's hard to really attack any other type of negative because there's not much. Yeah, he got crossed up last night on a really fastball. Big deal, but it happens. But, outside of that, it's like, what more can you ask for? 19 home runs. 19. We had 2 last year, right? Whatever it was. 2 from the catcher position. Like, it's incredible to have this. It's special when you have a catcher that can hit for power. Like, at this clip, like, he was touted as someone that could be a 30 home run type of catcher. You don't see that often. You don't. We're lucky to have seen someone that can do that, but you don't see it that often. And the fact that we have it now, it shows that you have a fantastic building block to really build the youth of this team moving forward.
Yeah, and you know what? Douglas Barnes' comment really sums up the only thing that I really need to add, because, look, we're all going to wax poetic here about Francisco Alvarez, but we have other things to get to that are more pressing, so I don't want to take too much time on it, but want to give his flowers for sure. Douglas Barnes saying, and he's patient at the plate too, and I think that's the biggest stride that he has made. Remember the Josh Hader at bat?
Always.
When he looked completely overmatched because he was anxious, swinging at everything. And that's kind of the at bat for everybody. However, that's not the only time maybe that we've seen that out of him. We've seen it a couple different times where Alvarez is a little jumpy, a little anxious, but we haven't seen it in a while. and we certainly haven't seen it consistently. He has found his groove. He has a ton of swag, and you can see that. You can see his approach is solid. So I love that comment from Douglas Barnes. I totally agree with that. I have nothing else to add with regards to Alvarez. I would just be regurgitating all the stuff that you said, all the stuff that us Mets fans really love. I hope he keeps it up. And just the one thing I will say is to answer Jeff Cohen's question going all the way back, I don't think he will lead the team in home runs. I think he will be second in the team in home runs. I think at the end of the year, when it's all said and done, I think he will have more home runs than Francisco Lindor. But I think Pete, even though Pete is down bad right now, I think if Pete is healthy and if Pete is right, he can hit home runs in bunches. And I know he's only 7 up right now, but I think that Pete can, that's a big cushion for a hitter like Alonso. And you're right. Look, whereas Met fans, we want Alvarez to keep hitting home runs and make it interesting, but I also want Pete to keep hitting home runs and not make it interesting. I want Pete to go off on a tear because we need Pete to do that. So to answer Jeff's question, I think it's possible. I hope it doesn't happen, but I think he will finish second. That said, let's move on to Pete, because that's the bad one, Ibby. He's hitting like 167 since he came back from the IL. It's been bad. I think he's only got 2 home runs or something like that in that span. And the question is he hurt? Did he come back too soon? Not hurt like he can do damage, but is he not 100% right? Or is it something else with Pete?
I always felt that when he did come back, it felt quick. It did. It's like when it happened, when he got hit, it was Morton, right? I think it was Morton that hit him.
Yes.
When he got hit, like, it was a scary moment. I was like, God damn it, maybe he lost the season. Like, I remember when Freddie Freeman got hit on the wrist, and it sapped his power big time. I can't remember what year it was, a couple years back, but it sapped his power big time. And it took him a while to get back to being what we know as Freddie Freeman. Now, he's fine now because he's fantastic. But the point being, like, when you get hit on the wrist, it does take a lot out of a hitter. There's a lot going on there. So the fact that his numbers have deteriorated since that moment, it kind of makes you wonder, is there something underlying here, or is it just simply he's having a bad year? Have things gone down? It's hard to quantify in that sense. Like, I look at it from the injury standpoint because of where he was and how he was doing. And then you say, well, then something happens, and now this is where his numbers have gone. Well, it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to look at things in totality here, it's like, well, I think that hit on the wrist might be playing somewhat of a factor here. Whether it's a big one or a small one, maybe it's something tiny. Again, baseball is a game of inches. Like, the smallest of inches is the difference between a pop-up and a home run. Like, it's minuscule. So, I think in time he can get right, but I am curious, like a lot of Mets fans are, if this is injury-driven, and if it is, should he, should there be like a quote-unquote like a phantom IL stint just so he can try and calm down and maybe get things right? Or if there is an issue, continue to work on it? I'm not sure in that sense, but I do feel that something is off. I really do.
Yeah, I'll jump into the comments here. Jeff Cohen saying he's confident Pete will get it going again. Carlos Ortiz saying Pete will turn it around soon. Rael saying he was brought back too quick. Someone should have held him back. This team needs a mentor. The veterans are not stepping up. I think that's a yes and no for me. Because look, this team is way too talented. I don't care what anybody says about guys being old. This team is too talented to be as bad as they have been. And so I think part of what Rael is saying here makes sense in a broad stroke across the entire team in the clubhouse. But as far as somebody holding him back, it's like, look, if the doctors clear him and Pete feels good, he's going to come back. Like, right. I don't know that anybody else
would.
Yeah, I don't know if there's and take a guy, go get a veteran on any team, whatever. Let's say the Mets sign JD Martinez. Like, JD Martinez ain't going to turn around and go, Pete, you should sit this one out. Well, the doctors cleared me and I'm healthy. Yeah, stay on the IL though. Like, no competitor is going to tell another competitor that. But I do agree with the fact that there's something amiss. But I don't think it necessarily plays into coming back from an injury, as it were. I think that when we look at what is going on with Pete, it is confounding. A lot of people are saying, hey, he wasn't, he was kind of mediocre in a way, right? Like the power numbers were there and the RBIs were there, but he wasn't making contact at the same clip prior to the
The
injury.
average was way down. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So,
not going to the opposite field, things like that.
So I do understand that there is something to be said. But when I look at a guy who has a very clear benchmark, like you said, there's a line of demarcation for Alonso. And that line of demarcation is he got hurt, he came back, and he hasn't been the same. Now, was he struggling before? In some ways, yes, but he wasn't struggling to hit for power, and he wasn't struggling to drive in runs. Now he's struggling to do those. So I don't think that he is healthy, and I think that is the major contributing factor. Carson weighing in saying, Alonso's hurt, and it's not hard to tell. I'm disgusted with how they've handled it. Even Pete, who wants to play every day, is hurting us more than ever. So that really ties into a little bit of what Rael was saying. Do you think it's the right move? Ibby, I know you mentioned this. Do you think it's the right move if you were in charge? Would you put Pete back on the IL, save him from himself?
I think when it comes to, I think it's easy to avoid saying it outright like that because you can simply, like, it could also just be, look, you're clearly pressing at the plate, and I think he is because he's trying to show that he can still do what he's always done, but it's not working. So he's trying to do a little bit more, and it's just not there. And then when you couple that with what's going on with him, with the information that's just coming out about Starling Marte, where he's like, look, I've been playing, it's fine, but I don't feel the same since the double groin surgery. It's like, well, yeah, we've watched you play, and it's like, that shows. So even Marte says, so like, it makes you wonder, should you take it upon yourself as an organization to protect players in that sense? Based off of where this team is, me personally, I would try my best to protect my players to make sure that they're right, because in the end, no matter what, these players are investments. They are for these teams. And if I want to have Pete Alonso, I want to make sure he's protected, and I want to make sure he's healthy, and I want to make sure he's able to do the things that Pete Alonso is supposed to be doing for me as an owner, for me as a franchise, for a team, for the fans, for everything, for the tickets, everything. Like, you got to make sure that that's able to happen. And it can't happen if you have him playing hurt. And if that's the case, then there's an issue here. And when I hear Starling Marte say what he said, kind of goes back to what you were just saying before. Like, if a doctor says you're okay and then everything checks out, then you can play. It's like, it still comes down to a player as well. And a player has to say, do I feel proper? Do I feel okay? And it's like, I think that you should maybe just say, hey, Pete, why don't let's put you on the 10-day, let's reassess. Let's give you a breather. Let's come back and then go from there. I think that something like that is probably possible. And it sickens me to say it like this because they're going to keep on trying to keep pushing to hold off selling as long as they can. But if something like this happens post trade deadline, that wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I'm going to bring this back up. I'm bring this one back up real quick. Public service announcement, hit the like button. Thank you for that. And please go ahead and do that. Carlos, I'm going to get to yours in a second. Carson says he was sacrificing contact for power before the injury, which he loves, obviously, but you need your wrists and arms intact to be a dead pull hitter, which is a very, very, very fair point. Carlos Ramos saying it's about time that Pete is no longer the decision maker in regards to playing time. Not only should he go on the IL, but he needs to understand he cannot play 150 games at first base. The DH is there. I'm going to vehemently disagree with that. I think Pete has shown over the course of his career, unless he's getting hurt in a freak thing that can happen to anybody, getting hit by a pitch, something like that, Pete is out there. I'm not saying you can never DH him. I'm not saying you can't give him a spell, but I also think that Pete is young enough and he's shown to be durable enough. And he also hits better when he's playing in the field, Ibby. So for me, I think right now at this stage in his career, barring something, this injury part notwithstanding, I think Pete can play 150 games at first base. That's not that many games out of 162. I'm sorry. I think he can still do that. I think he's young enough. I think in a couple of years, we start to maybe shrink that number down a bit to make sure he's fresh. But right now, I don't know if you disagree, but that I disagree with that.
I would say that I with the DH now, I like the idea of specifically when you can like, and they have all the information in front of them. They have all the analytics in front of them. It's like when you can tell that a player is starting to get a little sluggish at the plate because you're playing, 19 games in 22 days or whatever, like something crazy. Like I wouldn't mind if you said like if it was Pete's going to play 100 and even 140 games at first base, and then the rest, however, depending on how the season goes, like he's DHing. It's just like if you utilize it in the spots where you can tell he's becoming a little bit sluggish and you give him a breather and then he becomes a DH for 2 games and then it's just like it gets him back to being fresh. And then you want to keep him in as much of a groove as you can. But at the same time, he has shown over his career to this point that there are times within a season where he does get a little spaghetti legged, where he's just like there's nothing there, and he's beat because he is playing every single day. And I commend him for that. As a ball player, it's easy. Like I never played at the major league level or even close to it, but it's like I understand the thought process of wanting to be engaged in the game. It's not easy to just sit out and be a DH.
Right.
Which is why I never liked when people would rip on DHs. It's like you try to sit on the bench an entire game and just go out there and just no matter what, you are 1,000% always focused on, hey, nothing else can enter your mind. You're focused on one thing. It's like, it's not easy. You want to be involved. You want to be involved. You want to move around. You want to be active. So things like that always bother when people would rip on DHs, but I understand why Pete likes being active. And to your point before saying how his numbers are when he plays versus DHing, even though I do think his DH numbers are solid, but that's not the point. The point is if we spell him here and there, it's fine. I'm not here saying that he should play, half his games at first base and half of his games at DH. I don't think that's needed. No.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously you and I disagree on this a little bit, and that's fine. Carlos brings up a good point. I think it's one to be looked at. But just to play devil's advocate here, the Mets are not in a position, the way that their roster is constructed, the emergence of Alvarez aside for a moment here, the Mets are not in a position to not play Pete. In any way, shape, or form. He has to DH or he has to play first base every day because the power potential, even in the midst of a slump that he is mired in that is very, very, very bad, where he's not hitting for power, to Carson's point, where are the Mets going for power? Right. You know what I mean? Like Lindor has pop, absolutely. He's got the extra base pop, I would call it. But Alvarez and Alonso are the only 2 guys that drive the ball out of the ballpark consistently. Everybody else is a gap-to-gap power guy. Nimmo's a gap-to-gap power guy. Lindor's a gap-to-gap power guy. I'm not sure what Beatty is yet. He hits the ball on the ground way too much. Carson will talk about that, I'm sure. I think he has potential to be he obviously hits the ball very hard. So I think when he learns to lift the ball, he'll be a true power hitter, but he's not there now. Alvarez is there. Alonso is there. So those guys got to be in the lineup more than they are not. And it's frustrating, that when you have, I forgot who it was that brought this up on the show with us. It was one of our previous guests. And they basically said, it's frustrating because I thought the Mets' biggest advantage with Steve Cohen would be the, $10 million bench player who's excellent. The $15 million player who gets 500 at bats playing all over the field. Ben Zobrist was a star utility player. I don't mean him, but filling out the roster with middle relief guys with a ton of high upside and great velocity, and filling out the bench with guys who were versatile, that can actually hit, that can play, quote unquote, every day around in different spots. And in that sense, the Mets are a horribly constructed team. They are so thin in the middle relief. Sometimes you bring in guys, Tampa does it all the time. Guys will come up for Tampa. They throw 100 miles an hour. They basically have one pitch. They're a wipeout pitcher for
all the spin in the world.
They throw the ball with a tremendous amount of spin. Yeah. Sometimes they go on to big things. Sometimes you never hear from them again. And so the Mets really need to be in that kind of mindset,
Paul Revere,
that is not what he is known for saying. He's the British are coming. The British are coming. So sell, sell, sell. That's what he said. That was the second part of the sentence as he rode through Lexington and Concord. Listen, it's difficult for me to fathom, and I forget exactly who it is that was on our show that said that. Maybe it was Matt Williams when he guested with us, but it's just frustrating.
Williams or Minconi, maybe one of them.
It was one of them because it was around that time. It was a couple, maybe a month or two ago. But to me, that's the most frustrating part, is to watch the fact that I know we hit a home run last night, and I even said it on Twitter. I was like, look, I'll eat crow. I want the Mets guys to succeed more than I want to be right. And I don't hate on the lineup every day, but when you get to the point that we are in the season, Ibby, where you look at, okay, this thing did not go the way the Mets have wanted it to go. You cannot make an excuse for having DJ Stewart in the lineup over anybody else.
Yeah.
I know, look, early in the season, you want to see what guys can do. You want to see what kind of a guy you can have out there. In the midst of a season that is going according to plan, whatever the plan is for your team, fighting for a wild card, running away with a division, being mediocre, whatever it is, in the middle of a season that's going according to some plan that your organization set out, of course, to Carlos's point, to keep guys fresh, you got to get a DJ Stewart a start. You got to get these guys in the game. But when they are going the way that they're going, where every single game matters, and I know he succeeded, and I'm good with that because I'm good to be wrong about this, but it defies logic.
When you are paying, including the tax, like a shade below $500 million, and DJ Stewart is getting at bats, yes, he hit the home run last night, but that is not the type of player that should be in the lineup for this team. You could better construct yourself to have better types of players. And when you're paying this type of money, and we've spoken multiple times on the show and we'll continue to, it's not the money that we're really attacking here. It's more so the idea of it, because when you are spending your money, are you spending it properly? Because if you're getting to a point where DJ Stewart is getting at bats, it makes you wonder, like, what the hell are we really doing here?
Look, we'll hit on this last guy in a second, and then we'll head into the break. But I say this all the time. Baseball roster construction is about one thing: asset allocation.
Yes.
Trade the prospect if you want to. Make it count. Spend all the money in the world if you have it, because they do, and you can because there's no cap. But make the money count. That's why I'm not going to sit here and hate on, even though it doesn't work. I'm not going to hate on, or it hasn't worked. I'm not going to hate on the Verlander contract. I'm not going to hate on the Max Scherzer contract. They were logical baseball decisions based on what the Mets needed and what was available. It hasn't worked, and that sucks, but I'm not going to fault them for doing that. I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, my God, Billy Epler should have signed Nate Eovaldi instead. No, he shouldn't have.
Nobody thought Nate Eovaldi was going to – I saw it the other day. Nobody thought Nate Eovaldi was going to be this because everyone knew who Nate Eovaldi was. No one thought he was going to do what he's doing this season. Nobody.
No. And so it's about the logic. It's about the asset allocation. Earlier in these comments, Carlos Ramos said something that I agree with. He goes, look, there's now nobody in baseball that I would trade Francisco Alvarez for. He's going to be the best catcher in baseball by the end of next season, right? Certain guys do make themselves untouchable to a point. But you sit there and you look around. I said on this show last week, I would trade Brett Beatty in the right deal. Now, I don't want to, but I would. I think Mauricio could be a star. I would still trade him in the right deal. I would trade Vientos. I would trade Jeff McNeil. I like Jeff McNeil. I would trade him tomorrow off this team if it got us better or younger or whatever. You can trade guys all the time. You could spend money on guys. And Douglas Barnes brings this up. And this is what I'm getting at. He goes, I love Guillorme, but this is the worst bench in baseball. The bench sucks.
Yeah.
Guillorme is all field, no hit, right? That's Guillorme's MO. I understand he's a good bat to ball contact guy, but he essentially has very little hit tool, Ibby. So when Guillorme makes an error in a game, it's like the worst thing in the world because it's the one thing he's excellent at.
Correct.
Daniel Vogelback gets on base at a high clip for somebody who plays as sparingly. Nobody's going to confuse him with Joey Votto. For somebody who plays as sparingly as him, his best tool is his eye. Well, you know what? If he's not walking, then he's terrible. Even if he's walking because he's a liability on the bases, he's still terrible. What's DJ Stewart's tool? I'm not sure if he really has any. He's a guy. Their backup catcher is good. He's a decent backup catcher, but he's probably a guy, in fairness, that would be better as an everyday catcher somewhere. So I look around this bench and I'm like, where are they going? What are these people? Who are these guys?
Yeah.
I guess Mark Canha's a bench player now too? Okay, fine. What's Mark Canha's tool? Mark Canha does not excel, and I like Mark Canha. I was happy when they brought him on. He does not excel in any way, shape, or form in any way as a baseball player in the major leagues. Paul Revere saying, Pham if by day, Canha by night. Ibby, before we go into the break, because we can't do a 2-hour show like we did yesterday.
Right.
Or last week, excuse me. My brain is all over the place today. Let's talk a little bit about Max Scherzer and kind of put a close on these guys that we're talking about with Alonso, Alvarez, and Scherzer. This is why I said last week, I don't think Scherzer's done, cooked, whatever, word you want to use. 7 innings pitched, 1 hit, 3 walks, 6 Ks, gets the win, looks good doing it. I'm not saying Max is back. I'm not proclaiming something grandiose here, but this is why you can't say he's cooked. Because if you tell me he's going to have that outing, it's just as likely to me right now that he has that outing as he has an outing where he goes 4 1/3 and gives up 3 home runs.
It's confounding. Phones, baby.
It's not cooked.
Work those phones. You saw that 7 innings. You look great out there. I think Baltimore and LA, everyone should be calling. Hey, you want this guy? Come on, give me something. Give me a little something. No, but when you see him go out there and do something like that, it does show that there is still something in the tank. That competitor is still in there. Look, I won't lie. During that start, I forgot who I was talking with. I think it might have been Carson if he's here still. I think I was talking with Carson during the game, and I was just like, I'm on bated breath because we haven't reached the 5th inning yet. That slider tends to hang in the 5th and he'll give up a home run and he'll lose the lead. But that didn't happen. He pitched 7 strong, and it's a good thing to see. But at the same time, I still think that should be I'd still be shopping him. But I'll save my thoughts on that because I do have some thoughts in the second half when we talk a little bit more about the deadline and stuff. But it does show that he has value to him. And I understand some of the things that have been said from the Mets side in terms of value when it comes to Verlander and Max. And like I said, we'll talk about that in the second half. But in terms of Max in general, it was a good thing to see. It shows that there is value there. And I'm very curious to see how that changes anything for him in terms of where he might be come August 2nd of this year.
I'll use this as kind of the transition, this comment from this first half into the second half as we talk about trades and we wrap up talking about Max Scherzer. Paul Revere saying, it's sad to say, but the Mets are better with Max and Justin if they can't get anything decent in return. And I agree with that. I do understand what you're saying and what you brought up last week. And like I said, trade anybody not named Alvarez, Lindor, Senga, Alonso, Nimmo. You can trade everybody else on the team on the 26-man roster. I don't care. Obviously, Edwin Diaz too, but he's not playing right now, so he doesn't count. Trade any single potty else. It doesn't bother me. But I do think in the long term, the Mets are going to be better with these guys on the roster if they can't get anything decent back, because you are going to have to eat a ton of the money. Mm-hmm. And then look, and I'll eat the money. It's Cohen. He'll eat the money. I don't care. But if they eat the money and they get back a C prospect, what's the point there? So yeah, to your point, if they're good the next 2 starts out each, and you could sell high and you can get something decent, I will entertain that. But if I'm just trading them just to clear some money or just to shake things up, I'd rather have both of those guys on the team next year. Like I said, last year, pitching as 3 and 4 starters with guys who are younger at the top of the rotation because right now they're pitching like 3 and 4 starters. The problem is they were signed here to be aces, and they're not unrosterable. The Mets would be great if these guys were pitching like 3 and 4 starters. They're supposed to be aces. They're pitching like 3 and 4 starters. And then the rest of the team outside of Senga is supposed to be their 3, 4, 5. And some of them can't even stay in the major leagues. At one point, David Peterson had an 8.08 ERA. 8.08. It's insane. So anyway, let's turn the page on this. We'll head into the break. Everybody watching for the first time, stay tuned. It's a 10-second ad spot we just need for the audio version of this show. We're going to dive into really what is the most important thing over the next 2 weeks, the trade deadline as it approaches. What should the Mets do? Sell a little, buy a little, sell everything. Who knows? We'll be right back. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez, till Mets do us part. Yo, just like that, we are back with Till Mets Do Us Part. We're live on YouTube, we're live on Twitter, and of course, watching us here live on YouTube is the best way to interact with the show. All of your questions, comments, concerns, heckles, thoughts, stream of consciousness, whatever you want to use it for, come in real time. We can talk about it. You can agree, you can disagree, you can raise questions. All of that has happened so far in the chat, and we appreciate everybody doing that. We also understand that not every single person can watch every single week, nor can you watch the entire show sometimes, but you can always watch a little bit, and then you can catch up after the fact. As soon as we're done with the broadcast, this will live forever on our YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Till Mets Do Us Part. Be sure to follow the show on Instagram and on Twitter at Till Mets Do Us Part. And if you can't watch live at all or watch after the fact, you can listen starting tomorrow morning, courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network, wherever it is you get your podcast. All of that said, Ibby, we got comments here coming through about what to do at the trade deadline. Carlos Ramos saying sell Max, Marte, Vientos, Ottavino, eat the Scherzer contract, but be clear the roster spot and get anything back. Sign Urias in the offseason. So he's got his thoughts. That plan is as good as any. Urias is a stud. You know what I mean? Like, so that's fine. But I know that you've been chomping at the bit to kind of throw some trades out there or some thoughts regarding potential trades. So where's your head at with where the Mets should be thinking right now on July 19th?
Like I said last week, I think that I understand they're going to hold their ground as long as they can before they make a true decision. But I still think that the thought process should be of we're going to sell and focus on what pieces they're going to sell. And as you creep closer and closer, that'll tell more of a story. I think Michael Marino said it best today. He said how, the media is kind of running with this a little bit too much in terms of, the Mets win 2 games here or the Mets win 3 of 5 or whatever. It's like, maybe it's going to change your thought process. And he brought up the perfect point. We go back to 2 weeks ago with the Cohen presser and the question that was asked. And they go, Steve, if you're at this same spot where you are right now, come the deadline, what are you going to do? And he goes, I'm probably not going to do anything. I think it was kind of put in the sense where it'd be more so selling as opposed to buying anything because there would be no point. And what's the difference between when that was said and right now? A half a game. Nothing. It was 8.5 games when that comment was said. They're 8 out of the wild card right now. So not much has changed. Not much is the needle going to move that much in that front office if come the deadline they're 6 out? Is it going to change that much? I don't know. Should it? In my opinion, no, it should not, because we still talked about how you need to be you got to win 44 games to finish this out, to have a shot. That's not even a guarantee. That's just to have a shot to maybe get in. I understand the things that were just said by, it's just hilarious to say Paul Revere, but I understand I understand what Paul is trying to say and what others have said as well. And that is, if you're going to sell them, it has to be of something of merit that can help the team, because you're setting yourself up for failure come next year because there's nobody on the roster then that's going to fill those spots. And I get that. I do, which is why you always have to be thinking, 1-2 steps ahead about what your plan of attack is going to be. I see what Carlos is saying, and I always say it wrong. I don't know if it's Urias or Urias, however you say it. Julio's a very good pitcher. I think he got a little bit roughed up today. I think he did. But regardless, I think he's very good, and he's going to have a big market because I think outside of Ohtani, I think he's and Nola. I'm sorry, Nola too.
Those are the big three.
Those are the big three in terms of pitchers. So, look, the question that it's a tough spot, and I understand why it's tough, and I'm going to explain it right now. If you're paying Max Scherzer what you're paying, and assuming he doesn't go anywhere and he stays, and you're paying him $43 million, right? And then you still have Justin Verlander, and you're paying him $43 million, and you have no one else. And then you're saying, well, we can attack Julio, and we can attack Aaron Nola. And you're like, this rotation
Yamamoto,
is going to be,
you're going to have to pay.
Right. You're paying that price too. I was just going to bring up to you. So, because I know the Mets were out in Japan scouting him, but like,
he was in the comments earlier, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
He was?
Yeah. Yoshi Yamamoto was in the comments, confirmed viewer of our show, 100%. Just like Frankie Tank, definitely 100% had to be the real Yoshi Yamamoto. I mean, there it is.
Oh, hello from Japan.
And, I got to commend it.
That's awesome.
I didn't know prior to this that he spoke and could read and write in English, but clearly he can. So good for him. If he's still watching, would love you on the Mets.
Would love you to come here. It would be great. But no, I understand what people are saying when it comes to making sure you have contingencies, but also realizing, and I know money doesn't matter, but to me, it's almost like borderline ridiculousness when it's like, if you're going to have those two still on the roster, or even not here and still paying it, and then going out and signing one or two of those guys that we just mentioned because they're younger, and it's better to sign a 30-year-old than it is to sign a 40-year-old type of mindset, but then you're still paying a lot of money on those guys as well. And the next thing you know, your starting rotation is well over $100 million.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, like, am I doing this right? And look, we know Steve Cohen has all the money in the world. He can do it however the hell he wants to spend. Like, please spend all you want. But I still think that there are questions that would be asked where he would say, why am I spending over $100 million on a starting rotation? Why is nobody else doing this? I have the money. Yes, I can do these things. But at the same time, why has no one else doing it? So it's a question that is brought up, and I get it. But I still sit here and I say, if there are opportunities to attain something that helps the team, whether it's pitching or not, I don't care in that sense. What I care about is talent. I want talent on the team. So if an opportunity comes about, and Joe DeMaio mentioned it before, I know I talked about Baltimore last episode when it came to Max and how it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Same thing with McNeil, kind of makes a little bit of sense to an extent. But if I can package Max Scherzer and David Robertson, say that that's what it was, and you were shipping them somewhere, and it betters my return where I'm getting an outfielder that can be up with this team by July of next year. Me personally, I like something like that because there is nothing on this team down low when it comes to outfielders.
Yeah, that's fair. Listen,
like, I need something to come back. So I understand, like, I'm not saying just give them away and take nothing.
Listen,
I'm trying to angle it to a point where it's like, I can get something that can help me. It's like, people need to get this out of their mind. I'm not saying it's going to be, and I'm not expecting anyone to think it will be, but some do. You're not getting a top 50 prospect in baseball for Max Scherzer. You're not. You're not getting that for Justin Verlander either. Like, that's not going to happen. So get that out of your mind. But you can still bring back a solid player. I think the one thing I saw, the prospect that Robertson was dealt for last year from Philly, where was he coming? Where was Robertson coming from? Chicago. So Chicago. I think he's moved up the ranks. He might be like their third best prospect now because he flew up the ranks so quick. So he was a good player, and they wanted him, and they got him. So you can still find something like that. The question then becomes, do you trust Billy Epler to get said player or to get said gem to then bring over and make it worthwhile? That's where this becomes a little bit more difficult in terms of potential returns when you're talking about someone like Max.
There's two comments I want to jump into real quick. Carson makes a really good one. I don't think you can turn this team into a contender with one deadline. No 2-week stretch can change it. This team wasn't good enough last year, even with the good times, and it isn't good enough now. I think that sums up even though I've been holding on to some modicum of hope because I don't like to give up until things are, mathematically done or close to it. I agree with Carson. I don't think the Mets can make a run. I don't think this team has shown anything that they can. I said this a couple weeks ago, I don't think they're this bad, but I also think that maybe that team that won 101 games last year wasn't quite that good. I think the truth is probably something in the middle, high 80s, low 90s, in terms of what the team is actually capable of. And so I think that's a really astute possibility, or a really astute observation, rather, from Carson. Stevie Mack saying thoughts on possibly trading for a solid player with a controllable future to prepare for next year. That would be the only thing that I would do to buy, if you will. I'm buying a guy who I can have for at least one more season, hopefully more. And I think for the people out there like Patty in NYC who, does, and this is not a slight, Patty, please don't take it that way, but gets attached like we all do to certain players. They become likable. You got to be careful this time of year because I think some of those people, the Phams, the Cannas, the Robertsons.
It's hug season.
Those guys are going to go. Those guys are going to go, especially Pham, because I think Pham is, who Pham is, and not that the Mets executed this to perfection, but they did get back 2 decent prospects. Pham is Marlon Byrd.
Yes.
Remember when they traded Marlon Byrd for, Vic Black through 100 miles an hour and Dilson Herrera? That made tons of sense.
Yes.
That deal made sense. Right? Dilson Herrera was in that deal, wasn't he? Or am I messing that up? After I said it, it felt wrong.
I don't know if it was Dilson Herrera.
It wasn't Dilson Herrera because Dilson Herrera came when they traded one of either Jay Bruce or John Buck or something like that. That was a separate deal. But be that as it may, Marlon. This is a Marlon Byrd conversation. That's who this is. A guy who was signed here to be like, okay, he's part of the team. He's going to be a 4th outfielder. He'll hit some lefties, and now he's on a tear. You have to. It is malpractice, Ibby. If you are a GM and you sign Tommy Pham to be a 4th outfielder on your team, and he becomes one of the best players on your team this year, and you are not winning, it is malpractice to not trade him.
Have to. Agreed.
Absolutely have to. As far as the other guys go, man, when I look around this team, I said this last year about Robertson, or last week. My God, my head is. I'm sorry, guys. I'm scattered today.
Guys everywhere.
It's the car thing. It's
the 4 tires.
It's the 4 tires plus the 2 brakes that has me just. Blah, blah, blah. So I said this last week. I think you do signal you're fully out of it if you trade Robertson. Now, whether or not I believe, you believe, everybody in the comments believes, every single fan believes, the Mets are out of it, in it, contenders, pretenders. Shea said moments ago, hey, until they get back to 500, they shouldn't be buyers. It's laughable. And I agree with that. Yes. But if you trade Robertson with no backup on the horizon, you're signaling to everybody that you're done. You can trade Tommy Pham. You could trade Mark Canha. You could even trade Jeff McNeil or Max Scherzer and some of these guys in the right deal to get something back of significance where you're not necessarily signaling you're done. Because I think you can make the case if you lose Pham and you plug in Ronnie Mauricio in the lineup every day. I don't know. Can Ronnie Mauricio give you what Pham has given you so far? Coin flip. Right? Like
maybe eventually he'll need some time.
But that's what I'm saying. I think he's talented enough to do that. You also have to think at some point, even if it's a great year, that Pham is going to regress to the mean, right?
Right.
So, I think that this is what you have to look at when you are in the midst of this trading season. It's complicated. It is so complicated. It goes back to that comment that Carson made where he said, you can't turn this team into a contender in one deadline. And that's what you have to be wary of. That's the thing that I would be worried about. And I don't think this team is going to do that because I don't think Cohen is going to allow Epler to just, make a bunch of Victor Zambrano moves. But this team's got to be real, man. They got to look themselves in the mirror and understand what they are. And I'm as faithful as anybody. I'm going to watch every game. I'm as positive and optimistic as any fan that you'll find out there. But there comes time when you just apply logic. Like I said earlier, Ibby, going out and signing Justin Verlander, that checks the logic box for me. They needed a guy like that. They went out, they got him. This deadline, just apply logic. Think about how good you are and think about how good you could realistically become, especially acknowledging that most of the time, most of the pieces acquired at most trade deadlines don't even help.
Yeah, and I mean,
you know what I mean? Like you don't get CC Sabathia to Milwaukee and Yoenis Cespedes to the Mets, and like that doesn't happen every time. More often than not, the guys fail to live up, especially when they're rentals.
Right.
When they come over here for the push and the push only, most of the time they fail.
It's true. I mean, you just look at last year where the top bat that, based off of the statistics, the top bat was Daniel Vogelbach, and everyone hates the guy. Well, that just shows you that everyone else that was at the deadline didn't do anything.
In the same deadline where Juan fucking Soto was traded, the player with the best offensive contribution on his new team was Daniel Vogelbach.
So it's a lot. A lot of things changed, moving places, moving leagues for some. Like a lot goes into it. I sit here and I say that the likes, and I've been saying this, and I'm going to stick to this. There is no. Why are we laughing? What do we got? We got something good?
Douglas Barnes said the Mets don't even know who they are. How the hell am I supposed to? That is great. That's the, honestly, Douglas, I don't say this like, that is, there's been a few. Carson had one. There's been a few this sums up this whole show. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, it's true.
It is so hard for all of us, you and me virtually and everybody else in the comments. It's hard to talk about what the Mets should do because they don't know who they are. They don't know.
But here's the thing. Like, the fact that they don't know who they are tells you that there's definitely a large problem. Like, and that's why I continue to say, and I see some of the comments rolling in, and I get where Patty's coming from as a diehard. I get it. But I look at the team and I just go, I have no issue when it comes to, I'm all about a plan and planning and setting yourself up. I understand throwing in the towel is viewed as, being a quitter and things of that nature. And that's how it's associated. But I look at this and I say, you look at what the Dodger model was or is, and you spend all this money to put a product on the field to try and win ball games and sell tickets while you're trying to build up your infrastructure and build up your farm. They're still doing that. The problem is it didn't work this year, or it's not working this year at all. So what you're supposed to do in that moment is you go, it didn't work. How do I better myself moving forward? This is what I have to do. So I look at it and I go, okay, what pieces make sense for me to be here right now / next year? What pieces should be gone and what can I potentially get? That's why I still say the likes of Tommy Pham and Mark Canha, and they won't give away, they won't trade Narvaez because they want to have a backup. So I understand that. But Canha, Robertson, I understand the whole thought process. When you give away a closer as good as he's been, you're signaling that it's over. But I still sit here and I go,
people are saying in the comments, by the way, that they don't think there's a little bit of an argument going on between Paul Revere and Douglas Barnes, and
so
that if Robertson is on a 1-year deal, which he is, he won't bring back much. And Douglas Barnes saying a contender will overpay. I think
they always overpay for relief.
I think both of those are true. You don't expect for 37-year-old David Robertson.
I'm not expecting a superstar.
You're going to get a superstar prospect. You're not.
You're not.
If that's what you're quantifying as much, you're not going to get much.
Right.
But to Ibby's point from earlier and to Douglas Barnes' point just now, a contender will overpay because contenders always overpay for closing level pitchers. Always. Yes. And sometimes the fact that they're on a 1-year deal helps you.
Yes, because they're trying to just capitalize and get those returns and then be done with them.
Any team can afford, he's on a 10 million 1-year deal. Any team can afford to acquire David Robertson.
Anybody.
The Rays, they don't need him, but they could. The Oakland A's who don't have money, they could afford. Even the poor teams, the teams that cry poverty, can afford to take on $4 million of David Robertson because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a little less than half. So keep that in mind.
Right. And I'm just going to bring this up real quick because I think I know where he's going with this. Carson saying, I know what the Mets should do, but a majority of the fan base isn't going to like it. If I had the financial flexibility of Cohen, I would probably set the record the most transitions in a 24-hour span. Look, I read that, and I and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Carson. I read that, and I think you are thinking along the lines of where my mind has been going, and that is that this team should be focusing not only on what to do with this deadline in terms of next year, but also the following year, and just really focus on, like, if you want sustainability so badly, you have to really work at it. It's not easy to have a sustainable winner. You need to be younger. You're an old team. If you can, and I understand when people say, like, you don't just give players away, but I look at it and I go, I would much rather have youthful players getting an opportunity. So if I'm giving away a Pham and a Canna, and that gives me more time to see what's going to happen with Ronnie Mauricio and Mark Vientos and the younger type players, so I can see what I need moving forward to better my team as we continue down this long road of trying to find sustainability and winning, and ultimately winning another pennant, winning a World Series. Like, if you want those things, there's going to be some players that are axed along the way that you don't want to see go, but it's for the betterment of what you're trying to build. That is what is going on with this team right now, big time. So if you're going to tell me that I have to trade David Robertson, but maybe we have a shot at making the third wild card, it's like, if I can trade David Robertson and it's going to give me, like I said, a B-level prospect that might be able to help me next year, I'm going to do it.
Oh, yeah,
I am.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do it because it makes sense to do it. If I can get something to better the overall depth of my minors by trading Tommy Pham, by trading Mark Canna, getting the smallest of things, players that you have no idea who they are. You want to know something? I'll give everyone an example real quick. We all sat there in the offseason when it came to the acquisition of Joey Lucchesi. The acquisition of Joey Lucchesi cost us Endy Rodriguez. Does anybody know who Endy Rodriguez is? I'm asking you. Why am I asking this? Because he goes to Pittsburgh in the part of the 3-team swing, and he becomes one of the top prospects in all of baseball. But everyone thinks, oh, he was a nobody. It's like, well, guess what? He kind of worked out a little bit. Now he got called up. We'll see what he does. I know Henry Davis was struggling for them, but they call up Endy, and we'll see what he can do. But still, he ended up being, I want to say he was in the top 55 in terms of overall prospects. I might be wrong on that, but that's what happens when you can attack. Now, this is why I say it's a slippery slope, because Epler. Actually, no, I can't blame Epler because I don't know if that was Epler who did that. But the point is, you have to know your minors. You have to know what you're giving away and what you're attaining in order to capitalize and create those opportunities. I would much rather take those shots to see if I can get those types of players, if it means giving away an older player and sacrificing a little bit for now to taste a little bit of sweetness later on.
You know what, Abby? I'm going to take it one step further because I think most of the people are agreeing. Just in the comments, we don't have time to pull up every single one. People are saying, let's game for next season. Let's prep. Let's do what we need to do to focus, change the focus from this year to next year. We're not going to win a World Series, so who cares? That's been the consensus, right? I think most people on this live stream right now, most people that listen tomorrow and watch later and all the stuff, the way they digest this show, most people are going to say, You could trade Tommy Pham. You could trade Mark Canha. You can trade even David Robertson. I'm not saying I wouldn't, by the way, just to be clear. I'm just saying what that signals as a viewpoint from the rest of baseball to the fan base. I would trade David Robertson. But I think you trade all those guys, right? Absolutely. It's the harder decision guys that I think, it's the eyebrow raisers that I think should be firmly on the table if you really want to do something sparkling at the deadline. You want to do something that helps you for next season and beyond. I think you should be ballsy. I think there should be a Jeff McNeil trade. I know he hasn't been good. I would trade Jeff McNeil. I'd package him in a deal with somebody who needs a player like him. I would, Ibby. Again, I don't know what the deal is. I'm not saying giving away, but I would trade Brett Baty. I would attach Brett Baty to somebody and get a better prospect back. If you're telling me, you said, Scherzer and Robertson and Baty, do it. Go get me a prospect. You can get a third baseman. I like Baty, and I'm not saying, but that doesn't disrupt your youth movement. I would do that. And people have to understand, I think Baty has a lot of potential, and Chris Ferraro is saying McNeil is my favorite. McNeil's one of my favorite players on the team, too. I love Jeff McNeil's game when he's right. But you got to give to get. And people have to remember, Baty is a highly touted prospect. Baty is not on the same level as Alvarez. He wasn't as a prospect, and he's not on the same level as him as a player from what we've seen so far. And again, I'm not saying you trade him to buy Ibby. I'm saying I would deal him if it meant acquiring better pieces overall. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to trade Baty to get us, to rent a hitter to try to go for it. I would trade Baty to get us something that's going to be here for 5 years. Carson saying, and there's a reason why for the tough decisions of this core, because they haven't won anything to convince you otherwise, and most Met fans don't want to admit it. Yes. The only reason why, by the way, and I said it last week, and maybe Carson disagrees. I don't think so, because I know how he feels about players of this caliber. I wouldn't trade Alonso simply because I think Alonso is the best power hitter the Mets have ever drafted and developed. And I just think that that's crazy. I don't think you move a player like that when your number one issue on the team for the past 2 years has been power. You've got a guy that's hit 50 home runs and 40 home runs. The guy hits home run, blinks and hits home runs. He would be up there. He would be challenging Ralph Kiner for the most home runs hit in a guy's first 5 years or whatever if it wasn't for the shortened season in 2020. That's where Alonso is. That's the kind of power hitter you're talking about. Mm-hmm. He's Ryan Howard. He's Yordan Alvarez. He's Ralph Kiner. That's the kind of hitter he is.
To answer real quick, not to cut you off, but just to see Paul's here saying McNeil is going over another bad contract for his age. It's not a bad contract, Paul. I don't think it's a bad contract.
It's a very team-friendly contract.
It's a team-friendly contract, and even with his age, it's not something that would be handicapping someone from turning it away. I still think that it's a contract that could be movable. And I also understand what Carlos is saying here, saying, not Baty, John, that's the type of move we will regret. Don't try to hit a home run at the deadline. That's a trap. I understand that to an extent, but I also want to throw it out there. If Carson, you're still in the comments, I'm curious on your thoughts on this one. If, keyword is if here, if Brett Baty was dealt, what type of player do you think he would bring back to help this team? Now, I'm not here saying I want to trade Brett Baty.
I also don't want to. I don't want to go on record.
I'm just curious as to what, I know Carson has his thoughts on him, and if he's still here,
listen,
what deal he would deal him for.
I don't want to trade Brett Baty. I'm not advocating for it. I'm saying if you want the kind of jump start that Stevie Mack asked about, that a lot of people say they want going into next season, that you even mentioned, hey, attach some guys, get better value back. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that's a guy you have to consider.
Right.
Because they don't have many other players that they can attach of value. Brett Baty is the most valuable asset in terms of age and controllability and all of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, he is the best one. Because, McNeil's a decent one, but McNeil's older. And McNeil it's a good contract. It's a team-friendly contract, but maybe it is real money. It's real money for a team, like Baltimore. It's real money. It's not a big deal, but it's a big deal for a team that would be acquiring him. And that's all I'm trying to say is that I would look and think outside the box. Now, do I think the Mets are going to trade Brett Baty? I don't. I don't think at all they're going to.
I don't think they will.
And I don't think, to Carlos's point, I think he said it, I don't think Steve Cohen is going to allow Billy Epler to really deal with the Mets prospects in any significant way.
Or youth in general. Yeah.
Right. However, to go off the rest of the comment, it's not trying to hit a home run at the deadline. It's trying to maximize your return at the deadline. When I think of hitting a home run, I think of going out there and, we're going to try to get Ohtani. That's trying to hit a home run at the deadline. You're bringing back prospects that nobody's ever heard of. You're not hitting a home run. You're just going out there doing the best you absolutely can to maximize your return. It's, again, about asset allocation. And to that point, somebody mentioned, I think it might have been Paul Revere earlier, mentioned Brooks Raley. Brooks Raley's another interesting guy to me. Brooks Raley has had sneakily a very solid year. He's pitching to a 2.14 ERA. He's got a 1.2 WAR. Brooks Raley is also, he's not eligible for free agency until 2026. So he is controllable. However, Brooks Raley is also 35 years old. So, now I understand he's a lefty relief pitcher.
35, he's old as dirt.
He is old as shit. He's almost as old as me. So, look, I understand, you value, especially lefty relievers, differently, right? Those guys, sometimes they pitch till they're 45. So, I understand that he can be out there pitching and he could be, an asset. He's an interesting one for me because he's been good. I think the Mets could use a lefty. So he's somebody that I wouldn't label untouchable by any stretch, but more so than a guy like Robertson, I would be inclined, unless somebody blows you out of the water, Ibby, I would hang on to Brooks Raley. He doesn't make a lot of money, and he's been very good, and he's under team control. To me, I would stay there.
You can't. That's the whole thing. Like, as much as I am championing selling, I would basically say that you can't sell everybody because you still have to have pieces to a team. And I'm not saying just sell everyone and become a quadruple A team. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Like, I'm saying, like, you have to have an open mind. You have to be willing to talk on anybody. And when I say anybody, I legit mean anybody, because no matter what anybody says, everybody always has a price. Everything can always be attained if the price is met or something, or somebody, blows you away. Like you said before, it's always a possibility. So when you are sellers, you should always go into it thinking anything and everything is on the table. I will listen to everything. You can make me an offer and I could simply say, no, thanks. Don't like that. Nowhere near enough. What's next? What else do you got?
Right.
Like, I always think of that scene in Moneyball where, Billy's sitting there and he's talking with Mark Shapiro and he's in Cleveland. He's doing this whole back and forth. And he's just like, I'm thinking about so-and-so. And he goes, I don't think you can afford him. What else you got? And I want so-and-so. Like, we really like him. What else do you got? And he's like, Mark, what the hell are we doing here? It's like, well, you got to give me something. Like it's that back and forth. Like, you have to be willing to speak on everything, allow everything to be open. And I think that's the best way that you can potentially maximize your overall returns to make this team better moving forward. But like I said, overall, I think they're going to be open, but it's going to be reined in, because I don't think Billy Epler is going to have full autonomy, because I do think there's going to be some changeover in the offseason.
I just want to be clear, and I'm not trying to pick on Paul on this one, but I do want to be clear. Oh, this is a great comment from Chris Ram.
I just saw that one.
DiBiase. Everybody's got a price. Everybody's got to pay. Just to be clear to Paul, Jeff McNeil does have a new contract extension. Jeff McNeil is on a 4-year, $50 million deal with a team-only option for the 5th year.
Correct.
If you divide that money, it is $12.5 million.
You can move that.
you can move that contract. For perspective, for context, Mark Canha makes $10.5 million. If Jeff McNeil is right, and honestly, Ibby, even if Jeff McNeil is wrong, as he's been so much this year, you're telling me he's not a $2 million player better than Mark Canha? He absolutely is. He plays second base, left field, right field. You could stick him at third. He is a movable contract. Paul saying, not horrible. Yeah, not picking on you by any stretch. That is a movable contract. Look, we got to get out of here. We've been talking for a long time. We could do this all day. I got to go get my goddamn car. Carson, answering your question, said Beatty would most likely get back a frontline arm. That also depends on if you want to look at Mauricio as a possibility at third base, or you have my guy Matt Chapman, who's available in full free agency, who actually pulls the fucking.
I'm very iffy. Carson, I love you, but I'm very iffy on Matt Chapman. We can talk about that.
Listen to me. We can talk about that another time. There's this old adage when you're building a team in baseball, right? And it's not a picture perfect solution, right, or plan, but you build up the middle, right? Because those are the hardest guys to find.
Right.
You get the catcher, you get the shortstop, you get the center fielder.
Correct.
The Mets have a catcher, the Mets have a shortstop, the Mets have a center fielder.
Took forever to finally get that, but yeah, we finally have it.
Yes, it did. But the Mets have all three of those things right now for the foreseeable future. Yes. Two of whom are entrenched players with long-term contracts. The other one is a 21-year-old rookie who's not going to make any money unless the Mets decide to be smart and give him a contract extension tomorrow, because they should. And then the next most important spot, to a degree, you really get some bonus out of second base, right? Second base and catcher are those positions where, historically, if you're getting a ton of offense out of those, that's how you're like, oh shit. You look at the teams who get historic offense out of a place like second base or catcher, you're really doing something. So as I approach that to Beatty, it's just that they always say you can find corners. You can find left field, you can find right field, you can find third base, you can find first base. Now, it's not to say that if you have Alvarez, it's not to say that if you have Pujols, you walk away. Obviously not. You don't let him walk. You don't get rid of Alonso because you can find a first baseman. No, you can't really find a first baseman that's going to hit 40 home runs every year just waking up, but you can find certain guys. And so I, like you, are not 100% in on Matt Chapman, but if the Mets traded Brett Beatty in a deal that brought them back a top prospect frontline arm and signed Matt Chapman, I can't argue that they would be worse off.
Right.
That's my point.
Right. And they'd be better defensively. Look, I understand where he's coming from. I've always just been very iffy on a Chapman, especially, again, I can bring it back to my argument. Like, I think Matt Chapman's a better overall player, but Matt Chapman strikes out a ton. He does.
Yeah, and it's not just about him. It's just about the availability of guys at that spot.
Right. And I just know that, this fan base would not be able to handle that. Like, I know he started off this year red hot, super hot for Toronto, and then he cooled off big time, like he always does. He's a good ball player, fantastic third baseman, second only to Nolan Arenado at third. It's like, I don't know, but again, I'll save that for a conversation for another day, and one that I'll probably jump into Carson's DMs to joke about it.
I do want to ask you this. We don't have time to talk about it. I just want your immediate reaction to this thought. If you were the Mets, would you entertain acquiring Nolan Arenado?
I thought about mentioning this before. I didn't know if you knew about it. Honestly, price is always dependent. He's a great ball player. I love watching him play. 32 years old, a good amount of money. I know money doesn't matter. I don't know if that's why I'm going to, because he has you're dumping out your farm for Nolan Arenado. And I don't think this team is in a spot where it makes sense. So I would probably say no. And I love Nolan, but I would probably say no.
I agree. I think they need to get younger.
Yeah.
I think that his deal, which looked huge at the time, now looks small by comparison, right? The way guys get paid. I just think they need to get younger, and I wouldn't, even though you would have him entrenched at third for the remainder of that contract, right? You look, it's the Correa thing. if the Mets went out and got Nolan Arenado, they probably have to give up Beatty in the deal, but it allows you to move Beatty, right? It allows you to be flexible and do some things and blah, 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 blah. I don't think it's the right time. I would have loved Nolan Arenado in the same offseason that the Cardinals got him. I would have loved if
he's a finishing piece.
Yes.
Right now, it's not good for this team.
Yeah, listen, I wanted the Mets to trade for Lindor and Arenado. That's what I wanted the Mets to do that year. I think the ship has sailed. So that said, we got to get out of here. Hour and 20 minutes. It was great talking to you guys again, as always. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked what you were listening to. We appreciate everybody in the comments. When there's so many people, it's difficult to get to every single thing. We tried to address as many as we absolutely could. Of course, you can watch as soon as we're done. If you missed any of it, like if you're Chris Ram and you jumped in a little bit late, rewind it, watch it back. Let us know what you think. Hit the thumbs up, all that fun stuff. Or wait till tomorrow, listen to the audio. Rumors are out there and all that stuff. So stay tuned. Turn those notifications on after you subscribe so that you do not miss an episode. We will see you guys next time. Peace.